They spit on the girl with no clan, until the king revealed her name was the one the moon chose. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Amelia Clark was the girl who had no clan. She was born into a life of struggle, with no noble lineage to boast of, no ancient name to carry with pride. The people of her village spoke of her in whispers, often with mockery in their voices. The girl with no family, no heritage, they'd say, shaking their heads in disbelief that such a girl still walked among them. She was the subject of their cruel jokes and scornful glances. To them, she was invisible, an outcast. Yet, Amelia knew something they didn't. She had always felt there was more to her story than what met the eye. Her heart carried a secret she didn't fully understand. She had no memories of her parents, no clue about her origins, but there was always a voice inside her that told her she was destined for something greater. Day after day, she would walk the village streets, unnoticed, ignored, her presence barely acknowledged. Children would run past her, their laughter echoing in the distance, while the older villagers would exchange knowing glances when she passed. She didn't belong. But there was one person who saw her. King Thomas. The king, a man of imposing presence, had come to the village to oversee the harvest. His eyes met Amelia's for the first time one fateful afternoon, and he stared at her for what seemed like an eternity. She felt a shiver down her spine, unsure whether to look away or hold his gaze. The villagers, of course, said nothing. They had all seen the king before, many times, and knew how he regarded people like Amelia. He was a ruler of high status, one who held sway over life and death, and to him, people like Amelia were nothing more than specks of dust in the grand scheme of his kingdom. Yet, when King Thomas approached her, it was different. He didn't sneer, didn't turn away in disdain. He simply looked at her, and for the first time in her life, Amelia felt seen. "You are the one," the king whispered under his breath, so softly that only she could hear. The words sent a chill through her, for they were not words of mockery or scorn. They were words of something else, something mysterious. For a moment, she thought she might be dreaming. What did he mean? What was he talking about? And why her? Why the girl who had no clan, no name, no history to her? Amelia didn't have the answers then, but little did she know, those words would change everything. For that was the moment the king saw something in her that no one else had ever seen, something that no one else had ever understood. The moon had chosen her, and with that revelation, everything was about to change. Amelia spent the following days in a haze, replaying King Thomas's words over and over in her mind. "You are the one." What did he mean? Why her, the girl with no clan? Her every thought was consumed with confusion and curiosity. Yet, even as the questions swirled in her head, a strange sense of purpose began to grow inside her. It was as if, for the first time in her life, she was starting to understand that she was part of something far greater than she had ever imagined. The village continued its ordinary rhythm, the villagers unaware of the weight that now rested on Amelia's shoulders. They still avoided her, still whispered behind her back, but to Amelia, it no longer mattered. She felt different. On the fourth day after the king's visit, Amelia was summoned to the castle. The messenger, a young man dressed in royal garb, arrived at her modest home early in the morning. His eyes were wide, his voice shaky as he relayed the message from King Thomas. "The king requests your presence." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She had never been inside the castle, let alone been invited by the king himself. Was this a dream? She had always imagined that the castle was a place of wonder, filled with gold and mystery, a symbol of everything she had been told was beyond her reach. But now, the prospect of stepping inside felt less like a fantasy and more like a test she wasn't sure she was ready for. The walk to the castle was long, her steps slow and deliberate as the weight of the invitation pressed heavily on her. The castle loomed ahead, its tall stone walls towering over the surrounding land. The gates were open, the guards standing at attention as she passed. They gave her nothing more than a curious glance, as if unsure of why a common girl like her would be walking toward the throne room. When she finally stepped inside, Amelia was struck by the beauty of the castle's interior. The walls were lined with tapestries depicting scenes of royal glory, and the floors were polished marble, shining in the soft glow of the sunlight that filtered through the high windows. She was led through a series of halls until she arrived at a large, ornate chamber. The king was seated on a throne at the far end, his presence commanding and regal. His eyes met hers as she entered, and a strange calm washed over her. "Amelia," King Thomas said, his voice deep and steady. "I knew you would come." She stood frozen, unsure of what to say or do. Her heart pounded in her chest. "Do you know why I have brought you here?" the king asked, his gaze unwavering. Amelia shook her head, her voice caught in her throat. "No, your majesty," she managed to whisper. "You are special, Amelia," King Thomas said, his tone softening. "You are the one the moon has chosen. The prophecy has been fulfilled." Amelia's mind raced. The moon? A prophecy? She had heard of prophecies before, of course, but she had never considered that one might be about her. The king stood and walked toward her, his eyes filled with both wonder and resolve. "You have a great destiny ahead of you, one that will shape the future of this kingdom." Amelia's legs felt weak beneath her, and she struggled to find her voice. "I don't understand," she whispered. "How can I be the one? I am just a girl with no clan." The king smiled, a faint, knowing smile. "That is exactly why you are the one. You are not bound by the past, by any family or name. You are free to choose your path. The moon has seen something in you that no one else has. You have the power to change everything." Amelia's mind spun. She was the chosen one, but how could she possibly live up to such an expectation? She had no experience, no skills, nothing that would make her worthy of such a title. But the look in the king's eyes told her that he believed in her, that he saw something in her that she couldn't yet see in herself. "I will help you," King Thomas said, as if reading her thoughts. "I will guide you, and together, we will fulfill your destiny." Amelia felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. She didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she might finally belong somewhere. She might not have a clan, but she had a purpose, and that purpose would change everything. Amelia's days at the castle began to blur into one another. The walls of the grand hall became familiar, and King Thomas's lessons, though full of mystery, were beginning to make sense. Each day, he would guide her through the ancient texts, the prophecies, and the history of the kingdom. She learned of the moon's power, how it had guided rulers for centuries, and how it chose its champions, its chosen ones. But no matter how much Amelia learned, she still couldn't fully grasp why she had been chosen. She was just a girl, with no lineage, no legacy. Yet, here she was, standing in the heart of the castle, about to become something greater than she could have ever imagined. King Thomas was patient with her, never rushing, always speaking to her, as if she were already the person she was destined to be. But Amelia still struggled with self-doubt. Every night, as she lay in the grand bed provided for her, she stared at the ceiling, wondering if she was truly worthy of the moon's blessing. How could she live up to the expectations placed upon her? How could she become someone who could change the future of the kingdom? The moon's power was not something she could easily control. It was not like the sword or the shield that a warrior could wield. It was something much deeper, something tied to the very fabric of the land, to the stars themselves. And that was what terrified Amelia. She was not a warrior, nor a scholar, nor a ruler. She was just a girl with a broken past, unsure of her future. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, King Thomas summoned her to the royal garden. The air was cool, and the smell of flowers lingered in the breeze. The king was waiting for her by a large fountain, its waters sparkling in the fading light. "Amelia," he began, his voice warm but serious. "Tonight, we will begin the next part of your training." Amelia's heart fluttered. "What do I need to do, Your Majesty?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You will learn to listen," he replied. "You must listen to the moon, to the land, to the wind. It speaks to those who are worthy, but only if they are silent enough to hear it." Amelia nodded, though she had no idea what he meant. She had always been a listener, but this felt different. The king led her to the fountain and gestured for her to sit beside him. "Close your eyes," he instructed. "Feel the night air. Feel the pulse of the land beneath you. Let your heart become one with the rhythm of the earth. Amelia did as she was told, closing her eyes and breathing deeply. The air was cool, and the sounds of the garden seemed to fade away as she focused. At first, nothing happened. The night was still, peaceful. But then, a faint whisper reached her ears, so quiet that she almost missed it. "Amelia," it said, a soft voice like the wind through the trees. "You are the chosen one." The words sent a shiver down her spine. Was it real? Was it the moon? She didn't know. But she felt something stir inside her, something powerful and ancient. "Listen closely," the voice continued. "The future is in your hands. You must learn to trust yourself, to trust the power within you. The moon has chosen you because you are free from the past. You are not bound by lineage or blood. You are the one who will shape the future." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. She felt the weight of the words, the responsibility they carried. But even as doubt tried to creep in, something inside her shifted. She wasn't sure how she knew, but she knew that the moon's voice had spoken the truth. She was the one. She was destined to change everything. As the voice faded, the world around her seemed to come alive. The air hummed with energy, the fountain's water sparkled brighter, and the flowers around her seemed to bloom even more vibrantly. Amelia opened her eyes, and for the first time since she had arrived at the castle, she felt the weight of her destiny. She was not just a girl with no clan anymore. She was the chosen one, and the future of the kingdom rested in her hands. Amelia woke early the next morning, the cool air of the castle's eastern wing brushing against her skin as she stood by the window. Her heart was still racing from the night before. The voice of the moon had spoken to her, its message clear. She was the chosen one. It was a reality she was still trying to accept. She had spent her entire life as the girl with no clan, with no identity. But now, the weight of destiny pressed on her shoulders, and she was expected to fulfill a role she didn't fully understand. King Thomas had told her that she would shape the future, but what did that mean? How could she, someone with no training, no experience in ruling or magic, possibly change anything? Still, there was no denying the truth of what had happened. The voice had been real, and it had told her that she was destined for greatness. Amelia dressed quickly, her thoughts racing as she made her way down the long hallways of the castle. The king had promised to guide her, but she was beginning to realize that the path she was about to walk would be hers to choose. She could no longer hide in the shadows, no longer pretend she was just a simple village girl. Today, she would begin to learn what it truly meant to be the chosen one. King Thomas was already waiting for her in the royal library, a room filled with ancient books and scrolls. He was seated at a large wooden table, his eyes focused on an open book. When Amelia entered, he looked up and smiled, as if he had been expecting her. "Amelia," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "I trust you slept well." "Yes, Your Majesty," she replied, though the words felt hollow. She wasn't sure if she had slept at all. Her mind had been too consumed with the revelation of the night before. "Good," the king said. "Today, we begin your training in earnest. The first lesson is this. To be the chosen one is not to be burdened with the future, but to embrace the present. The moon has chosen you because you possess something rare, a heart untainted by the past." Amelia listened intently, though she still felt uncertain. "But how can I change anything? How can I shape the future if I don't even know where to start?" she asked, her voice trembling. King Thomas placed the book aside and stood, walking toward her. "That is the second lesson," he said. "You do not shape the future by force or by power. You shape it by understanding the present, by seeing the world as it is, and by listening to the people. The moon has not chosen you to be a ruler in the traditional sense. You will not command armies or make laws. You will lead through compassion, through wisdom." Amelia felt a flicker of hope, but also fear. Could she really do this? Could she truly lead with compassion when she had always felt like an outsider? "The first step," the king continued, "is to understand the land you will one day protect. Tomorrow, we will visit the village. It is time for you to see how your people live, to listen to their struggles and their joys. Only then can you begin to understand your role." The king's words were simple, but they carried weight. Amelia nodded, though her heart was still uncertain. She had spent her life avoiding the villagers, avoiding the very people she was now supposed to lead. How could she connect with them when they had always seen her as nothing? The next day, King Thomas and Amelia rode out of the castle toward the village. As they approached, Amelia's stomach churned with nerves. The village looked the same as it always had, humble cottages with thatched roofs, children playing in the streets, and the elderly chatting under the shade of trees. But to Amelia, it all felt different now. She was no longer just one of them. She was the chosen one. As they entered the village square, the people stopped what they were doing and turned to stare. Amelia could feel their eyes on her, their judgment, their curiosity. She felt exposed, vulnerable. But King Thomas was beside her, his presence grounding. "Today, you will learn," he said quietly, as they walked deeper into the village. Amelia nodded, taking a deep breath. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew one thing for certain. Her journey had truly begun. The village was busier than usual, the cobbled streets filled with the sounds of people chatting and vendors calling out their wares. As King Thomas and Amelia entered, the chatter quieted, and all eyes turned toward them. Amelia felt the weight of their gazes, each one scrutinizing her, wondering what this meant. The villagers had heard the rumors of her being the chosen one, and now they were seeing her in person. Her heart beat faster as the quiet stretched, but King Thomas remained calm, his presence unwavering. "Do not fear," he said softly, sensing her discomfort. "The people are not your enemies. They only seek to understand." Amelia nodded, but her stomach twisted. She had always been an outsider here, the girl without a family, without a name. Now, she was expected to be something more, something greater. King Thomas led her toward a group of villagers gathered by the well. They were an elderly couple, their faces weathered by years of hard work, and their grandchildren played nearby, kicking a ball back and forth. The king greeted them warmly, but it was Amelia they all turned to, their eyes full of curiosity and hope. "This is Amelia," King Thomas said, his voice carrying the weight of a proclamation. "The one who will help guide this kingdom to a new age." The elderly woman stepped forward, her eyes kind but sharp. "I've heard the stories," she said softly. "The girl with no clan, chosen by the moon. Is it true, child?" Amelia swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had never felt more exposed. I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "But I am here to listen. I want to learn what you need, what you desire, what you fear." The elderly woman studied her for a long moment before nodding. "I suppose that's a good start," she said. "Too many leaders come to us with promises, without understanding. You, child, seem different. I hope that's true." Amelia's heart lifted. Slightly. At least one person here wasn't judging her outright. She glanced at King Thomas, who gave her an encouraging nod. He had been teaching her to listen, to absorb the world around her without rushing to fix everything. "What is it you need most?" Amelia asked the woman, her voice steadier now. The woman paused, as if weighing the question carefully. "We need peace," she said quietly. "Our crops have been failing, and we struggle to feed our families. The winters are harsher each year, and many of us are growing old. We need someone who can help us change our future, someone who understands." Amelia felt a lump form in her throat. These were the people who had always looked down on her, the ones who had treated her like an outsider. But now, they were speaking to her as though she could help them, as though they were counting on her. "I will do my best," she promised, the words coming out more firmly than she felt. "I will listen, and I will learn. Together, we will find a way." The elderly woman smiled faintly. "We'll hold you to that, girl," she said with a warmth that made Amelia's heart swell. The moment stretched on as the village began to return to its daily rhythm. Amelia stayed a while longer, walking through the streets, speaking with the villagers, listening to their concerns. She learned of their struggles with crops and the relentless winters. They spoke of their hopes for a better future, a future that seemed so far out of reach. As she walked, the weight of her destiny began to feel more real. She wasn't just a girl with no clan anymore. She was Amelia, the chosen one. And though she didn't have all the answers yet, she knew one thing. She would give everything she had to change this kingdom's future. The sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the village, and as Amelia looked at the people around her, she felt something stir deep inside her. A sense of purpose, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, she could do what the moon had chosen her for. She wasn't sure how she would do it, or when. But she would start here, in the village, by listening, by learning, and by showing the people that she would fight for their future. She was no longer just the girl with no clan. She was the girl who would change everything. The days that followed Amelia's visit to the village were filled with both promise and uncertainty. She spent time in the fields with the farmers, learning about their crops and how the harsh winters had made their work so much harder. She walked through the village, speaking with the people, listening to their worries, their hopes, and their dreams for a future that seemed beyond their reach. Each conversation opened her eyes a little more to the struggles they faced, and with every new understanding, the weight of her destiny grew heavier. King Thomas had said that she would shape the future, but how could she possibly do that? She was only a girl who had no clan, no lineage, and no real experience. But every day, she could feel the stirrings of something inside her, something more powerful than she had ever known. The moon had chosen her for a reason, and though she did not yet fully understand why, she knew she could not turn away from this path. One afternoon, after spending hours with the farmers, Amelia sat by the castle's small lake, her thoughts swirling. The air was cool, and the sound of the water lapping gently against the shore calmed her racing mind. She closed her eyes, remembering the words of the elderly woman in the village. "We need someone who understands." What did that truly mean? How could she possibly understand the depth of their needs when she had never lived through their struggles? Amelia had always felt like an outsider, like a girl with no past and no place in the world. But now, she was beginning to understand that maybe her lack of a past was the very thing that could help her change the future. She was not tied down by old allegiances, old expectations, or old ways of thinking. She could see the world as it was, without the limitations that bound others. And maybe that was what the moon had seen in her. The sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts, and Amelia opened her eyes to see King Thomas approaching. He smiled warmly as he sat beside her, his presence comforting. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice gentle. Amelia sighed deeply. "I'm not sure," she confessed. "I've learned so much, but there's still so much more I don't understand. I feel like I'm supposed to be doing something, but I don't know what that is yet." The king nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "You are learning, and that is the first step. The moon did not choose you to have all the answers from the beginning. It chose you because you have the potential to learn, to grow, and to understand the people you will one day lead. You are not expected to have all the answers right away, Amelia. You are only expected to listen, to be present, and to lead with compassion." Amelia looked out over the water, contemplating his words. "I want to do what's right for the people," she said quietly. "But how do I know what that is? How do I know what they truly need?" King Thomas placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch warm and reassuring. "The answer lies in the people themselves. You cannot lead without first understanding them. The villagers are not asking for a savior. They are asking for someone who sees them, who hears them, and who will stand with them. Your role is to be their voice, to guide them toward a future where they no longer have to struggle. It will not be easy, but if you remain true to yourself and to them, you will find your way." Amelia felt a surge of determination rise within her. For the first time, she began to see what her purpose could be. She wasn't supposed to fix everything at once or have all the answers. She was supposed to be there for the people, to listen to their needs, and to help them find their own strength. She would help them rise, one step at a time. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow across the lake, Amelia made a promise to herself. She would not let the weight of her destiny overwhelm her. She would listen, learn, and lead with compassion. She would show the people of this kingdom that they were not alone. She would help them build the future they deserved, even if it took every ounce of strength she had. She was no longer just the girl with no clan. She was the one who would bring change. As the weeks passed, Amelia's sense of responsibility grew stronger. She spent every moment she could in the village, speaking with the people, learning about their lives and their needs. Each conversation revealed new layers to the kingdom's struggles, and she began to see just how deep the roots of their problems ran. The winters were harder than ever, and many of the villagers were beginning to fear that the land itself was rejecting them. Crops failed, animals perished, and families were left with nothing but uncertainty. Amelia couldn't ignore the weight of the challenges they faced. Her heart ached as she listened to their stories, and she knew that if she was to fulfill the promise the moon had placed upon her, she had to do more than just listen. She had to find a way to help them. But what could she do? She was just a girl with no clan, no magic, and no experience. She didn't have the answers, but she knew that she couldn't stand by and do nothing. One evening, After a long day of speaking with farmers, Amelia found herself walking alone through the castle gardens. The air was cool, and the stars shone brightly above, reminding her of the moon's presence, its quiet power. As she walked, her thoughts swirled, and she couldn't help but wonder if she was truly ready for the task ahead. She had never imagined that one day she would be the one to lead the kingdom, to bring change. It all seemed too big, too impossible. Just then, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw King Thomas approaching, his expression soft but knowing. "I see you're still thinking on the future," he said, his voice calm. Amelia smiled faintly. "I can't stop thinking about it," she replied. "The people are struggling. I don't know how to help them." The king walked beside her, his eyes thoughtful. "That is the burden of leadership, Amelia," he said quietly. "You won't always have all the answers. The key is to be present, to listen, and to take action when the time is right." Amelia stopped walking and turned to face him. "But what if the time never comes? What if I'm not enough?" she asked, her voice shaky. King Thomas stopped as well, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You are enough," he said firmly. "You have already done more than most would ever think to do. The moon chose you for your ability to listen, to understand. You don't need to have all the answers right now. You only need to begin. Every step you take toward helping the people is a step toward the future you are meant to create." Amelia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words settle inside her. Maybe he was right. She didn't need to have everything figured out all at once. She only needed to take that first step, to begin. The next morning, Amelia gathered the villagers together at the town square. There was a sense of nervous anticipation in the air, and the villagers whispered amongst themselves as they waited for her to speak. King Thomas stood beside her, his presence solid and comforting. Amelia took a deep breath, her heart racing. "I know many of you are struggling," she began, her voice clear but filled with emotion. "I have heard your stories, your fears, and your hopes. I cannot promise that everything will change overnight, but I can promise that I will stand with you. Together, we will face these challenges. Together, we will find a way to heal this land, to restore what has been lost." The crowd was silent for a moment, and Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. Then, slowly, the villagers began to nod, their faces softening. She could see the hope in their eyes, the belief that change might be possible. "We are with you, Amelia," one of the farmers spoke up. "We'll help you. We'll do whatever it takes." Amelia felt a surge of gratitude and determination. She wasn't alone in this fight. The villagers were with her, and together, they could make a difference. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. She wasn't just the girl with no clan anymore. She was the leader they needed, and she would fight for the future of the kingdom, no matter what it took. The days following her speech in the village were filled with a renewed sense of purpose for Amelia. She could feel the weight of her role settling on her shoulders, but it wasn't the crushing burden it once was. Now, it was a responsibility she was ready to bear. She worked side by side with the villagers, listening to their concerns, learning more about their struggles, and offering whatever support she could. King Thomas had been right. It wasn't about having all the answers. It was about starting with small, meaningful steps. Together, they could build something better. Yet, as much as Amelia felt the bond with the people of the village growing stronger, there were still moments when doubt crept in. One evening, after a long day of discussing farming techniques with the elders, she found herself standing by the castle's balcony, looking out over the fields stretching far into the distance. The wind was cool, and the stars sparkled above her. Her thoughts returned to the moon's promise, that she was the one chosen to lead, to bring change. But what if she wasn't the right person? What if the villagers would tire of her promises? What if, despite her best efforts, nothing changed? Just then, she felt a presence beside her. It was King Thomas, his steps soft on the stone floor. He, too, had been looking out over the horizon, his hands resting on the railing. "Amelia," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You're wondering if this is all enough." She nodded slowly, not looking at him. "How do you know? How do you know if I'm doing the right thing?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. King Thomas smiled gently. "Because you are doing it. You're here, you're listening, and you're leading with your heart. The people can feel that. It's not about perfection, Amelia. It's about showing up, day after day, and being present. The moon chose you because it saw your strength, your compassion. It saw something in you that even you might not fully understand yet. Amelia turned to face him, her heart swelling with gratitude. But what if I fail? She asked, the fear in her eyes clear. King Thomas's gaze softened. Failure is not the end, Amelia. It's just a lesson, a chance to learn and try again. You've already done more than many could ever hope to do. The people trust you because you are real, because you care. That is what makes a true leader. Amelia felt a sense of calm wash over her, the uncertainty in her chest beginning to fade. Perhaps King Thomas was right. It wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It was about continuing to try, continuing to lead with compassion and understanding. As the night deepened, Amelia and King Thomas stood side by side, silent for a moment, each reflecting on their own thoughts. The future was still uncertain, but one thing had become clear. Amelia was not alone in this journey. With King Thomas's guidance and the support of the people, she knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The path would be long, and the road would not always be easy, but Amelia was no longer just the girl with no clan. She was the one chosen to lead, to heal, and to shape the future of the kingdom. And that was a responsibility she would carry with honor. As time passed, Amelia found herself growing more confident in her role. The villagers, once skeptical and uncertain, now looked to her with trust and hope. Her days were spent working alongside them, learning more about the land, and helping them find ways to adapt to the changing seasons. The crops were still struggling, but together they began to find solutions. They planted hardier seeds, and Amelia encouraged them to try new methods of farming, even experimenting with techniques she had learned in the castle's library. It wasn't an easy road, but the progress was evident. The people were beginning to believe that change was possible. One afternoon, as Amelia walked through the village square, a young boy ran up to her. His face was flushed with excitement, and he couldn't seem to contain his smile. Amelia, Amelia, he called, tugging at her sleeve. The crops, they're growing. The new plants you told us to try, they're already sprouting. Amelia's heart lifted as she looked down at the boy. That's wonderful news, she said, her voice filled with pride. I knew you all could do it. The boy's eyes shone with excitement. We did it together, Amelia. You helped us believe. Amelia smiled warmly, a sense of joy swelling in her chest. It wasn't just the crops that were growing. It was the community, too. The people had started to come together in ways they never had before. They were no longer just surviving. They were thriving. Word of the village's progress spread to neighboring towns, and slowly but surely, more people began to seek Amelia's guidance. King Thomas, too, had noticed the change. He visited the village often, and each time he saw the progress that Amelia and the people had made, he was filled with pride. One evening, after another long day of work, King Thomas and Amelia stood together at the edge of the village, watching the sunset. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, and the air was calm. You've done well, Amelia, he said, his voice filled with admiration. Amelia turned to him, a smile on her face. We've done well, she corrected him. This village, these people, they've shown me what true strength is. King Thomas nodded, his expression thoughtful. True strength comes from within, Amelia. You have given them the strength to believe in themselves, and that is the most powerful thing you could have done. Amelia's heart swelled with gratitude, and for the first time, she truly believed in herself. She had been chosen for a reason, not because of some destiny set in stone, but because she had the power to bring out the best in those around her. It was her heart, her ability to listen, and her willingness to stand with the people that had made the difference. The future was still uncertain, but Amelia knew one thing for sure. She wasn't alone in this journey. The village, the people, and even the king had become her family. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they would build a future filled with hope. As the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, Amelia felt a deep sense of peace. She was no longer the girl with no clan. She was the leader they had all needed, and in her heart, she knew that the future was in good hands.